Okay, welcome to Culture Creative. I'm Luke Ledhill, your host. Culture Creative is a platform that brings together people who I think are incredible, amazing at what they do. So hopefully that you'll learn some insights and pick up some gems from what they've learned along the way and what they do. I run a brand development agency called Just Up the Road that helps brands and companies really relay their story and narrative to the end person, the end consumer, or the citizen. I also run the 21st Think Tank, which brings together people that do good and give back through social, spiritual, and environmental initiatives. So I've been waiting a long time for this conversation today. I have a very good friend of mine, Drew FitzGerald. I'd love to bring Drew in.
Hey, Luke.
Hello, Drew.
How are you?
Very good to see you, mate.
As
I just mentioned, this has been a long time coming. I've been pestering you for a while now. I know you're one of the busiest people that I am privileged to know, and I'm very grateful for your time to have this conversation with you. So, Drew, can we start? Can you just say who you are and currently a very brief overview of what you do right now, and then we'll go back a bit further after that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm super honored to be on, Luke, and I know it's taken a second to get this together, but we live in crazy times, and you'd think in this situation that people would have more free time, but it seems as though the people around me and maybe with yourself, it seems like we've been busier than ever. We've just had to focus our energies in different directions for different areas. So I'm Drew FitzGerald, and I graduated college with an art degree, and I now sort of work in engineering and the impact space around larger decarbonizing issues in energy, food, water, and shelter. And I started a company with Jaden Smith, Just Water, which is an alternative to plastic bottled water with ethical water acquisition strategy and model that was established. And then that's been going very, very well, and it's international now, and it's going well. But Jaden and I have then launched a nonprofit called 501c3, which looks at the intersection of energy, food, and water, and storytelling and communication. So we're having a lot of fun with that. I need it now more than ever.
Yeah, for sure, Drew. I have to unpack that a little bit. I know you're underselling yourself as you always do. You say Just Water is doing quite well. I mean, from my eyes and in my opinion, knowing the brand Just Water and how global that is and the impact that you guys have had with the product that you created together, I think that is truly inspiring. Do you want to talk a little bit about that quickly before we go into 501c3 and everything else you're doing?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to find it Just Water just in case people don't know what it is. Yeah, so basically, I've been working in Hollywood for about 20 years, right? I came out here and I was an art director for a hip hop division of Universal, right? So within that, I ended up, in late 90s, early aughts hip hop. I ended up, doing a lot of work. Having art directors in that environment was in very, very high demand. There wasn't a lot of people working in that space. And so I ended up making a kind of my name in this sort of hip hop entertainment community. And I ended up doing some work for Will Smith and then one of his bands that was in his original management company. And the kids were really little this time. And he'd only been married to Jada for a little bit. And then Jada had an album. I did some work for her. And then I just sort of rode along in that community. And anytime Will or Jada, and then eventually the kids had projects, they usually wanted to visualize it. They needed somebody to kind of think through it. And I was their go-to person. So it was great, great relationship with the family. And I've seen the kids grow up. Like the first time I met Willow, she was like in roller skates, now she's taller than me. And so after some time, the work that you would do would start to make its way to talent agencies. Talent agencies were trying to expand into corporate accounts. And then I ended up getting more work for corporations like Hyatt, Harrah's, Coca-Cola. And one in particular was an interesting one that I ended up doing, and I was very excited to be on, was General Motors' launch of the Volt, the Chevy Volt, the all-electric vehicle.
Wow.
And that was about 2008. And there was a thing I learned way back in the day when I was like a complete nerd and junkie for advertising. And I loved advertising design, graphic design, just really got moved by stuff that was cool, and clever, and that was, in my late 20s, it was like, I'm going to go be cool. I'm going to do cool shit. That's what I'm going to do. I'm a pretty good designer. So I have the ability to kind of try to, swim up that stream. And one of the things I learned was a famous quote from, I think it was the guy who founded McCann Erickson. And he was said, we need to know our client's business better than our clients as marketers and advertisers. And so when I got the Chevy Bolt project, I was like, I need to go headlong into electric cars. Why are they needed? This is 2008, right? So it was a long time ago. And so I started to become a complete geek on alternative fuel vehicles, why they're important, what's a combustion engine, how does it run, what does it do, what's its detriments to the environment, et cetera. And wanted to direct my efforts towards something that I saw was an ethical and a moral innovation for a largely polluting environment, vehiculation. And when we think of cars are a problem, but we have to think about how our environment moves, how the head of lettuce gets to the store over here, how the Amazon package that arrived today. There's systemic carbonization all throughout the transportation and the way the world works, right? And okay, so that's a little, I wasn't able to really articulate that in 2008, but in 2008, the market crashed, and I literally was working on this GM project when the CEOs of GM took a private jet to Capitol Hill to ask for $30 billion worth of bailout of the too big to fail automotive agency. I'm sitting there looking up at the screen at like CNN while I'm trying to make General Motors a cleaner, greener, kinder, gentler company. I was like, are you fucking kidding me, guys? You're killing me here. It's just the audacity of the industry was dramatic. And so then when they went to pick up the money, they actually drove a Bolt to DC. So anyway, I'm very excited about that. And then the market crashed. Obama took over. And having grown up in a small manufacturing town where a lot of the jobs had gone to Mexico or overseas, I looked at it and I looked at this comedy. Oh, and Inconvenient Truth came out. So I was working on Chevy Bolt. I started getting a hyper education in terms of where we need to go for decarbonizing. The market crashed, the economy tanked, manufacturing jobs were lost, and people in my little small town, which is indicative of many small towns across America, were out of work. And I'm sitting here and I had this sort of naive dream. I was like, wouldn't it be just wonderful if we could put manufacturing people, in the Rust Belt back to work making solar panels or making cleaner, greener things? That would be great. And that would solve all the problems and all the anxiety that Drew was having at that time, right? And so, that was a bit naive. And then right about that time, Willow and his sister Jaden started getting involved with their own environmental journey because they were surfing and they were starting to have a little bit, when you're a young kid, you learn to surf. You're usually taught by a surfing teacher who's usually kind of spiritual and is, going to tell you about the connection between the water and the land and the humans and the elements, et cetera. And so that stuck very well with the kids, specifically Jaden. And Jaden really started understanding this, and he started having a little bit of anxiety. He's a very precocious, at that time, he's a very precocious kid, having grown up in celebrity and handling quite well and very studious. He learns that his parents are both very well-read and continue to read. If you ask them, they do not look at knowledge as something that's absolute. It's a constant journey. Jada particularly. And so he kept coming he'd come to his dad and it'd be like, Dad, there's a whole ocean full of plastic and it's awful. And Dad, we need to get an electric car. And Dad, why don't we have solar panels? And basically Will makes the joke that he said, have you told your mother about this? Right. And that, like any dad, mom relationship. And then Jada was like, I don't know how to help you, but maybe go talk to Drew because he seems to exhibit some sort of interest in this. I like Drew's, he's fun. His maturity level is about yours, Jason. So they sent him over to me, and if Jaden were here to tell you, I guess I was kind of the only one that would listen to him because a lot of them thought that he'll go on to something else. He'll be excited about something else, and he hasn't. And it's got it's kind of in his bones about the environmental. He wanted to get involved with the environmental conversation, understanding about how to use his amplification and its voice in this area. And I said, all right, well, listen, everything in Hollywood's a negotiation, right? So I said to Will and Jada, I said, I will gladly create a curriculum, like an at-home curriculum where we can all learn on our own journey. But Will, you have to send me to MIT so I can get a crash course of everything. This is back in like 2009, right? And he's like, all right, deal. And so I decided if I was going to go and help learn and together with these two young minds, that I wanted to do it appropriately for the conversation and not direct them in a probably a well-meaning but relatively ceremonial thing, like, Starbucks plastic straws type stuff. And so I went on this journey, and it's been a decade journey where, so basically the kids, Will and Jaden, were like, well, why isn't California fully powered by solar panels? Or why aren't companies acting in the best interests of people and the earth and the planet? And I was like, well, what was an environmental lesson or what is quickly became a technology lesson really became a question of dollars and cents. It became a little mini MBA. That there's a lot of costs involved with solar panels, and who's going to pay for it, and how is this going to affect, and why are they more expensive than fossil fuels at that time? They've come down significantly. And so what started as an environmental class kind of turned into like a business class, really. And I said, all right, let's do this. Let's make a fake company. Let's create a company from scratch the way we wanted we would like to see companies perform today. Let's look at, where do you put it? What do you make? What is it made from? Who does it hurt? Who does it help? How do you employ people? Why is we didn't get to water yet, but why are employing people close to Manhattan different than employing people close to Canada? What does that affect on them? And they were like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then I was like, what do you want to do? What do we want to make, kids? And they're like, let's disrupt bottled water. And I'm like, great, cool, all right, let's do it. So we just looked at water. Where does water come from? What's plastic? How is plastic made? Why is single serve bottled water popular now, but it wasn't 20 years ago? How much will people pay for? The whole thing. And we created this fake company, basically, as a science project in this class. And then we presented it to mom and dad. And I guess we did such a good job that they're like, there's a business here. And we found this awesome package in Europe. And it was like, this, came up with a great name and packaging. And Will was like, I love this. Let me talk to some of my friends and let's get some angel investment and see if we can go. And that was about 9 years ago. And now we're in 22 countries. And as of February, we've reduced the need for 1.4 million pounds of plastic, and we've reduced 1.2 million kilograms of CO2. That's not emitted or made.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a bit of a long origin story, but
no, I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that story you just told me then, Drew, because there's a lot that I don't know about that backstory with Just Water. I mean, one thing that I do know is you and I first met at an event where you spoke on a panel, and I was blown away by your concept of science mixed with solutions to environmental initiatives or issues. And just the way that you were able to articulate it. And instantly we clicked, and I would be calling you or texting you constantly, I guess, kind of a little bit like how Jaden was. And I remember you just eventually, after several calls, you said, go and get Drawdown.
Drawdown.
There's a book called Drawdown. You said you told Jaden to get a copy, or you got Jaden a copy and you stuck it in his Tesla car so that any questions, you would just make him read that. So
no, there's a caveat to that. I would drill the hole in the corner of the book and I chained it to the back seat of the car because he, like many young kids, kept losing it. So I actually there's a copy that has a chain of it because I was like, dude, if you don't read this book, you're in trouble. So anyway, go ahead. There you go.
Yeah. So Drawdown, you really helped and have mentored me on a lot of things, and Drawdown has been an open door for my mind to really know and understand and believe ways forward for good for the environment and initiatives that can take place. And really a testament to you, Drew, and the work that you've put in, that you explained from 2008 to where you are now, because as soon as I mention this book and I quote some things from the book, whether I'm at an event or meetings or talk to people, they're instantly making notes and buying copies. And that's all. I mean, obviously a testament to Paul Hawken, who wrote the book as well, and all of the scientists involved in it. Okay, Drew, so from just water, I'd like to hear a bit about 501c3.
Sure. Just before we start that, Paul, Paul has a new book coming out called Regeneration. It should come out in the fall, COVID dependent. And it's a follow-on to that. And thankfully, Jaden and I are advisors to the Regeneration Project, which is nice because we get an opportunity to interact with Paul, who's really quite a thoughtful, just a very kind and thoughtful fella, who's been hard at work during lockdown to finish up Regeneration. But Regeneration, drawdown is largely about hardware solutions for the most part. There's a couple of things that are social justice issues that shouldn't be undersold, but for the large part, they are scientific hardware solutions for decarbonization. Whereas in Regeneration, his migration is to go to more, I'd say, like more agrarian, agricultural processes, and about drawing attention to the idea of regenerating the soil and regenerating the earth is not just like hippy dippy shit. It actually is it's the skin. If the earth were a human, soil is the skin. The Amazon would be the lungs. So soil is the skin, and nobody likes dry skin. And if you don't have dry skin, I'm sure something is off with your body. But if you take care of it and you moisturize it and you take care of these things and you regenerate it, it's a massive carbon sink. And if all the dirt on the planet today, dirt versus soil, if all the dirt that's on the planet, all the stuff, all the terra that's considered dirt, which is more or less not nutrient rich, not really farmable, just, sort of dead. If it were all turned to soil, we could undo all the carbon emissions since the history of the machine age. Like, that's not like, 1 year's worth of carbon. Like, everything ever done ever.
Yeah.
By regenerating soil, anyway, I could go deep on soil. But then there's a lot of other things like indigenous agricultural practices that he celebrates, and it's pretty exciting. Anyway, sorry.
Before you jump into that, what I didn't say is the book Drawdown by Paul Hawken is the top 100 ways to draw down carbon from the atmosphere, which can set back, as you were mentioning, those figures with regenerative agriculture. Everything that's in this book is doable and is being doing right now at some extent. But I mean, regenerative agriculture, if you dig into that, no pun intended, there's, like you said, it will change the world for sure. It's just not sexy. But I know there's people at the forefront of it that are doing incredible things, like with Farmers Footprint and all the other nonprofits out there that are helping farmers, opening those conversations up. Because if anybody's listening or watching this from the Midwest or somewhere that is big farming culture, I can understand those are small towns, small cities where the farmers are, and they all talk to each other. And if one person's not in line with everybody else, it's difficult to make that shift, right? I get that. Yeah. Sorry, Drew.
Legacy thinking in that. There's a lot of pride in farming, and as it should be. And at least from the initial foray into this, from speaking to a lot of people like Indigo Ag and Ag BioN, which are two interesting players in the space, that a well-kept farm is a sign of pride and respect. But scatter crop and overgrowth is a really interesting way to keep CO2 in a plot. And it's not pretty. It looks like you're not keeping up your farm, but it's a really important way to have side scatter cropping. And it's just hard to undo generations of thinking, from this. And so there's social reconstruction and legacy thinking around some of these issues where you can, it's not just, hey, here's a new technique, or hey, here's a new gizmo, or here's a new, solution, or here's a new seed that's more drought resistant because of a nano coating that comes not from Monsanto, but came out of a lab at, civil and environmental engineering at MIT or UCLA or something like that. Sorry. So that's, I forgot your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could talk forever about regenerative agriculture. A 501c3, Drew, I love this story, and I'm super interested to hear more.
Well, thanks. Yeah, well, so, Jade and I did Just Water. It's off and running, and we we realized that with the amount of, with my time, in some of the engineering schools, and specifically my time of working with things that have come out of MIT and then worked at MIT in different departments and getting an understanding of it, I would just bring Jaden along. And, the education beyond, hey, Will and Jaden are 11 and 9, and we created this thing, and we're talking about like fossil fuels and solar panels. They're much more mature now. They're much more sophisticated, and we can talk about more sophisticated concepts, more sophisticated solutions. Jaden certainly can speak about drawdown and a lot of the technology inside of it, and he feels very comfortable about that. Not every 21-year-old is going to be like, yeah, let me tell you about, offshore wave energy. It's not, it's just not normal. And so, we looked at that we had such a wide community and a wide breadth and a deep bench of experience in a lot of the areas in the sort of deployed and solutions-based thinking, whether it's sources of capital all the way to hardware, whether you're looking at how philanthropic dollars can help close the investment gap that threatens the universe, how impact investing can work or not work well, all the way to, where are we in terms of the development of a commercial product for nuclear fusion? And what does that mean? And what are the obstacles? And so I would just bring Jaden along because, quite frankly, he was somebody to talk to about it, and he loved it. So I'd be like, dude, check this out. This is cool. And he's like, yeah, this is cool. They sent me something. Go, what do you think of this? I was like, I don't know. Let's go find out. This is awesome. So we knew we wanted to go off and create a larger sort of approach towards helping to largely decarbonize. But we kind of looked at it and said, like, well, having a foundation and a charity and the historic way that charities work, it's kind of slow. It's a bit skittish. It doesn't really connect with the younger generation. It doesn't really deal with storytelling. If you go to any of the top 10 charities in the world, you go to their home pages. Now, it's not that they're not doing great work and they're mobilizing tons and tons and tons of capital. But you go to their website and they don't connect. They don't connect with a movement. And when you look at where Jaden sits and the role he plays in his generation and the general overall, what we would call generational anxiety towards climate change, I'm 49. If I was 19 right now, I would have a different sense of peace and not for the better. Looking at specifically in this time and if I was a minority and I was African-American, there'd be even a larger sense of anxiety that probably had been around for quite some time for most of my life. Now that it's being talked upon, or being spoken about, and the other half of the company is waking up to the idea that reform is desperately needed, and it's not something that just popped up 4 weeks ago. And I'm sorry, this is turning into more of a justice conversation, but that the self-examination of us as Americans goes as far back, it goes back hundreds of years in terms of the way the country was built, formulated, economically driven, really has race and racism and classism from our displacement of Native American and indigenous peoples to the importation of slaves that built New York City, that built Wall Street, that built, most of the economic underpinning and labor in the South. I don't know why I sort of went on a bit of a diversion there. Basically, with myself and Jaden, we wanted to look and say, how do we create a new system for developing impact? And one of the strong suits that we have is that we certainly have a great backdrop of. We have a great armory, I'd say, of storytellers. We have fantastic storytelling. There's so many people within the network. When you think of the Smith family, there's the Smith family. There's so many people around them, and their goodwill and their passion and Westbrook Entertainment and Westbrook Media are all things that have fantastic storytellers and fantastic editors, writers, very organized, great professional people that are just out there and want to change the world. And so we looked at it and we said, listen, let's create a foundation from the ground up, and let's create an impact system, right? Let's not just create, hey, we're going to create a charity and we're going to grant stuff and we're going to do this. That's old. And it's kind of tired. It could use some innovation. In America, in the 50 states, there's $600 billion in charitable foundation and endowments. That's everything from Gates to MacArthur to Kellogg to the Knight Foundation, $600 billion. That's larger than the GDP of Saudi Arabia. I mean, that's insane.
That's
the amount
crazy.
of charitable, and so $30 billion by law, in the tax code, $30 billion has to go out to every year. That's part of the rule. I got to get so $30 billion goes to charitable things each year. And when I got involved with a group called Prime in 2014, there was some information we came around that in 2014, 0.02 of that 30 billion went to anything climate related.
Wow.
And that's a weird thing. And it's not that it wasn't that these foundations or this charitable capital wasn't like interested in climate change. There's just, where do you give it? There's just so much you can give to the Sierra Club, WWF, NRDC, Conservation International, which are largely conservation and environmental law firms. The people on the front lines of climate change are the kid out of MIT with the new battery storage technology for wind and solar. He's not a charity. He's a for-profit company. So how do you bridge the gap between philanthropic capital, which historically is supposed to go to philanthropies or other charitable nonprofits, and how do you bridge the gap between that charitable capital and this kid who's an entrepreneur coming out of MIT starting, Acme Battery Co. And they're actually, and the group we got involved with was actually one of my earlier days at MIT. A woman named Sarah Carney. This was her graduate work about how to bridge the gap between philanthropic capital and early stage clean tech innovation. And she's successfully done it. And I got Will and Jaden to give a grant and get her off the ground, which was great. And now they just closed a $60 million round, largely philanthropic, to help early stage clean tech entrepreneurs. So that was a meandering kind of explanation. But Jade and I basically said, all right, let's go out there and be better at telling stories about technology and deploying technologies we can tell stories about. And so because we had so much water expertise, because we owned a water company and we certainly learned everything we could about water, had great water engineers around us, we were like, let's go to Africa and help a group that has a water access issue or just needs water to subside. And we started talking to some people, some NGOs in like DC, and they were like, honestly, guys, that's a big mountain to climb because there's a lot of people over. There's a lot of NGOs, a lot of hardware, a lot of money. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of infighting, a lot of difficulties trying to navigate stuff on the continent. Look in your backyard. Look at Flint. Look at the Central Coast of California. Look at Los Angeles. Look at Oakland. Look at Baltimore, DC, even parts of Boston, upstate New York, coal country, all the way through the Rust Belt, Detroit, and look at the water problems that are right here in America, right? And so we were like, all right. And so naturally, the one that would be unfortunately the brightest shining star in the corrupt and corrosive water one would be Flint, Michigan. And so Jaden and I sat down and said, you know what, let's make our first project something in Flint, and let's figure out everything we can about that. And as we look at the water map in the U.S. and where water is at a detriment, probably going to be no surprise, but they are largely African American, Latino, and multicultural and indigenous peoples populations. And if you do a really cursory search, it's pretty easy to find information on this. You can see that this neglect of basic services to communities of color, and that could be a variety of services. That obviously is the most dramatic one that we're witnessing in this day and age is policing and the lack of oversight or lack of reform in policing. But it goes all the way down the line to critical services like clean air, like access to internet, access to connectivity, access to better infrastructure for roads, public education, green space. There's a shocking chart that I saw about still this day and age, communities of color have slower internet than white communities, right? And think about the knock-on effect of that. Your internet's slow. We've all been inconvenienced, like, oh, my internet's fucked up. But if you constantly are missing connectivity, you're missing out on opportunities to better yourself. You're missing out on educational opportunities. You're missing out on a variety of them. You're missing out on the access to basic services. And so it's no surprise that in that, if you carve it up into a pie, there's a sliver of that pie that water has been historically and systemically hard to access on the black side of town versus the white side of town. And when segregation started happening and towns started having like the opportunity to live, middle-class white people to buy a home in a particular town, that opportunity came to them easier than in the communities of color. And it allowed municipalities to deliver different types of services to different parts of the town. And you can obviously understand who's going to lose out in that one. And so we looked at Flint, and when we looked at Flint, we were like, look, there's an issue here, and you can't just roll into Flint and just say, hey, we're going to go fix Flint. It's just not. They've had too many celebrities, too many photo ops, too much corruption, too much corrupt leadership, failure, anyone to do really anything, and nobody trusted anyone. And you can't just roll in, and you certainly don't want to roll in with coming in from Hollywood and say, oh, we want to get an Instagram post at this thing. You got to go in quietly, and you got to go in with the only community that really still preserved any trust with the residents, and that was through the church, the faith-based community. And so, am I talking too much?
No, I just wanted to preface what you're going to say, because several people that might be watching this or listening to this might not know about the issue with the water in Flint. So can you just shine a bit of light on what that actual issue of the water access is in Flint?
Sure. Flint used to access its water from a very clean water source. And in 2014, a couple of kind of backroom deals to save money took the water that was largely from the Detroit area, in Flint's about an hour northwest and they took it from the Flint River. And the Flint River was polluted. There's a lot of industry in Flint, specifically automotive, and even the GM plant that was in the area, I think it was GM, were the ones that sort of raised the flag and said, wait a minute, we're having a hard time painting our auto parts because they're corroding. What's going on? And, and obviously they don't want to raise the flag. And basically this new water source came and corroded all the pipes very quickly. And it takes the lead off the pipes. And this water was very, very high in lead, right? And lead, once you ingest lead, you can never get it out. And lead has a ton of problems, and it unnaturally, disproportionately affects children and older people. But these people were drinking the water for quite some time until a pediatrician brought it to their attention and kind of exposed it in a news story. And everyone freaked out at the time. And the mayor, we since had two mayors in Flint, sort of scrambled, like, oh, there's nothing to see here. Oh, get a Brita filter. Oh, there's no problem. But infant prenatal mortality went up like 10x. People's hair were falling out. And the effects of lead can be very long-lived. A child who's ingested lead when they're 7 could very well have cognitive or developmental issues when they're 20. And these people were drinking the water, and then the water smelled funny, and it was brown. And once you send lead through pipes, you have to replace those pipes. And it's a very challenging thing. If you look at the way this sort of water infrastructure works, it's kind of like your body's circulatory system. Like you have really big veins in your sort of aortic area, right? They're really, really big. And then as they move through your body and they get smaller and smaller and smaller until they're like little capillaries, right? Well, this is the homes where people live. This is the city center, okay? So you can go in and fix that stuff, right? But these are largely concrete pipes, and then they become like lead pipes. Then they become copper pipes, but they're soldered with lead. So this water was taking the lead and pulsing it. And all of a sudden, it also it's not like a constant stream of lead. It's like it pulses. So one day you might test the water and it's clean. The next day it may have well over the EPA approved amount of human ingestion for lead. Sorry, that was kind of a long thing. But basically, Flint is an absolute calamity of lies, mistrust, trying to save water, not caring about the well-being of the people that you're supposed to be the leaders of, and damaging a whole community, both physically and psychologically.
So just to move on from that, Drew, tell us briefly about the water boxes that you took to Flint, Michigan to help them. And from that, I'd like to lead into what you're currently working on. Just to preface that, I've had some incredible conversations with amazing people about food inequality in lower income areas and suburbs of cities.
Sure.
So tell us about the water boxes in Flint, Michigan, and then talk a bit about really water inequality with regards to race as well.
Well, water and food go hand in hand, obviously, from a standpoint of where there tends to be, there's a term that is kind of being used a lot now, but it's called food deserts, right? And food deserts are when I walk out and I'm in a relatively low income part of town, and there aren't, like in the 40s, there's not a local supermarket, there's not a local grocer, the Walmart is over here and I don't have a car, so basically all I have is liquor stores, bodegas, processed food, chicken shops, stuff like that. And that's how the north side of Flint is. So, and I'll explain to you some of the things that we're doing looking at that. So we basically went to the faith-based community and we went to Flint. We were like, all right, here's the deal. Somebody directed us to this really wonderful couple that's the pastor and the first lady of a church in the center of Flint called First Trinity Baptist Church. And so we just kind of went in really quietly, had a very quiet meeting and said, tell us about how you are serving your community. Tell us about your water mission. And they were one of the first people on the front lines of handing out bottled water. And they kind of fell accidentally on that. People just started, they were like, Katrina was like on the Rachel Maddow show or something like that. And explaining this problem in 2015 and how they went, Ezra and Katrina went to like Costco and bought a bunch of water and just started getting it out to people. And all of a sudden it caught national news and pallets of water were just coming in from all over the country. Crazy. Like a truck would show up in the middle of the night and the trucker didn't know where to go. He's like, hey, I got all this water here. It came from like a church in Texas or something like that. And so the Baptist church, in these communities, this Baptist church isn't just like, hey, it's Sunday morning, I go to church. It's a real hub of the community. The center on Wednesday night, there's Bible study, and then you can get some food after, and you can hang out, and there's all